Doing a special video, so I wore my best shirt. Hello, we're halfway through the year, so let's talk about some of the best books that have come out in this year so far. I wrote them down somewhere. I got 11 because I couldn't do 10. And a caveat, two caveats. One is that I could have made this 20 or 30, but I have to slim it down. It has to be reasonable, and I've already cheated by making this top 10 a top 11. The other one is that I really wanted to include Piranesi on this list, but I'm pretty sure Piranesi came out last year, but I really liked Piranesi, so I'm going to mention it here, read Piranesi, and watch my video on Piranesi. A few other random caveats. Usually at the end of a year, when I do an end of the year roundup, I only feature works in translation that were not originally written in English, but this time I'm not doing that, because I've read a lot more stuff that was written in English that I need to talk about, and my favourite book of this year so far was written in English, and I'm not going to not talk about it. Another thing is this list is not really in any particular order, except for my number one pick, which I'm going to leave to the end, because I want you to watch my whole video. It's good for the algorithm. Is there anything else? I think that's it. Let's go. Land of Big Numbers by Teping Chen. This is a short story collection. Teping Chen is an amazing writer, and this is a debut collection of short stories that are all based in China or have Chinese protagonists. They are absolutely wonderful. There are 10 stories in this collection total, and they deal with a little bit of politics and social dynamics, but they're also very, very personal. I was amazed by this collection. I did a video on it and I absolutely loved every single story in this collection, and a few of them hit me particularly hard. These stories ranged from excellent to outstanding. There is not a bad story in this collection, but the ones that hit hard really hit particularly hard. And I'm not going to spoil them here. You can go watch my video or just pick up the book. The Shape of Darkness by Laura Purcell. I've got it behind me here. Can't be bothered to get it out. This is a really, really great novel by one of my favourite modern Gothic historical fiction novelists, Laura Purcell. She wrote The Silent Companions, she wrote Bone China, The Corset, which is also behind me, and The Shape of Darkness is her newest and fourth novel, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's set in Bath, it has a really fantastic hook, and it really sets its tone beautifully. There is a lot of bleakness in it, there's a lot of snow, there's a lot of coldness, not just in the weather, but in the characters and their relationships. And it's like The Corset, it blends different protagonists' narrations and perspectives together, and it also makes you question whether or not there is anything supernatural going on here at all. This is peak modern historical Gothic fiction. This is everything that I like to see in historical fiction, in modern adaptations of the Gothic style. Laura Purcell is the best at what she does, and she's done it again here. Please check out The Shape of Darkness if you like Gothic fiction, if you like historical fiction. This is it. This is the peak. You probably knew this was going to be on here. Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Kazuo Ishiguro is my favourite novelist in the world. He's incredible. And Clara and the Sun is not his best work, but it's up there. It's really up there. It's a high ranker for me. I loved it. It is a return to science fiction, and the last time that he did science fiction, he created what many think is his best work. It's not my favourite, but it is arguably his best, I guess, depending on who you ask. And I'm talking about Never Let Me Go. Anyway, Clara and the Sun, really great. Kazuo Ishiguro has perfected that craft of only building as much of the world as he needs to. You can clearly see that in his mind, he perfectly understands his world, and he tells you, the reader, as much as you need in order to understand the world enough, but keep the focus directly on its characters. And the titular Clara, who is this android companion, is one of the most wonderful protagonists in a story that I've ever seen. Someone so human in her heart, and there is obviously a sense of irony in this book where a lot of the adult human characters are quite cold and distant, and Clara is a lot warmer. And obviously you've got the sun and this connection to religion, and there's a lot of ideas floating around. I'm not going to go into it. I have a whole video on it. I cherish this book. I love it to pieces. Clara and the Sun is one of Ishiguro's finest, and I'm so glad that we have it. I love it. I have to be careful not to ramble. I love this book, Clara and the Sun. You've probably already read it. You probably love it yourself. If you haven't, please read it. He's the best. On to some of my favourite translated books so far this year. The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez. This is a Spanish language collection of short stories from Argentina. It is gothic and dark and twisted and strange and horrible and lovely and wonderful. It's a collection of stories, all of which are set in Buenos Aires, and they are all gothic in different ways. There are curses and hauntings and witches, and it takes an ordinary, modern, true, real place populated by millions of people going about their lives and injects it with the weird and the strange and the gothic, and it all feels so tangible and real, and every story is unique, but every story is cursed in some way. It is truly modern gothic. It is horrible and wonderful. It has a terrifying cover. The design of the cover is beautiful. The translation is stunning. I really love The Dangers of Smoking in Bed. This is a very big highlight of the year for me so far. I've read a lot of great short story collections this year. I love short stories. And another highlight for me is the Japanese short story collection by Kyoko Nakajima, Things Remembered and Things Forgotten. I think about the stories in this book every single day, I shit you not. These stories have really stuck with me in a big way. These are stories about time and family and responsibility and love. They are stories that spread themselves from around World War II to the modern day. They span 100 years of Japanese history. They go into war and politics and economics even, and they explore our relationships with our families and our relationships with time itself and the way that time changes us and we change the world around us as time moves on. It's a really incredible and very intimate collection of stories. Every single one is memorable and unique and beautiful. They are about love and family connections, and they are so warm even when they're not warm. They really are stunning, splendid stories. I love Things Remembered and Things Forgotten. Please check it out. It's so good. A highlight from the start of this year is Luster by Raven Leilani, which made it onto the long list of the Women's Prize and the shortlist? I can't remember. Not sure. Anyway, Luster by Raven Leilani is fantastic. It is the debut novel, I think, by a black American woman writer who has done something splendid here. Luster tells the story of a young woman in New York City who enters into a relationship with a middle-aged white man from suburbia, and you find out that this white man and his wife have an adopted daughter who is a young black girl, and our protagonist, Edie, I think her name's Edie, forms a really tight relationship with this young girl because she becomes a kind of role model as a young black woman for this young girl who lives in white suburbia. It's about class, it's about race, it's incredible. I love Luster. It's a very slender book, very quick to read, and it's very raw and personal, and it uses pop culture references like video games in a really fun way that made my heart flutter a little bit, because it felt real. It was lovely. Yeah, Luster is great. People are still talking about it, and I'm glad to see it. I really, really enjoyed this book. Another book from the start of this year, and I think it was the first book that I read and reviewed in January of 2021, was My Brilliant Life by Aran Kim. This is a Korean novel, and it's really sad, but poignant. I absolutely loved this book, hence why it's on this list, and people are not talking about it. People didn't talk about it much when it came out, but My Brilliant Life is great, and it got overlooked, and I'm not going to let that happen. If you haven't read My Brilliant Life, please check it out. It's set in a small village in South Korea, and it's told from the perspective of a young boy who is very, very sick, and he is raised by two parents who had him way too young. They were teenagers, they got knocked up, they made some mistakes, and he is writing this journal that he's going to turn into a book that he can give to them on his own 17th birthday, I think, which might be his last birthday. And he's journaling all of this together, and he's retelling the story of his parents' life and his childhood and the gifts that they have given him and the wonderful life that he has lived thanks to his loving parents who have done the best with what they had. It's a very, very touching novel. I think I'm remembering it right. It's tough, I read a lot of books, but I loved it at the time, and I think I'm going to end up rereading this one whenever I get the chance. It's really poignant and beautiful, wonderfully translated, a great Korean novel. Check out My Brilliant Life, please. Don't let it get overlooked this year with all the other big prize winners. My Brilliant Life is fantastic. A recent read that I really, really enjoyed and I've talked about in multiple videos is 100 Boyfriends by Bronte Purnell. Bronte Purnell is a gay black writer from California who has penned 25 strange and queer love stories. These are brutal stories about sex and sexuality. They are very, very punk queer love stories. They're not all about love. They're about the shape of love and sex and lust in all of its different forms. I've talked about it to death, honestly, so go check out my video on it and any other videos where I mention queer stories. I've probably mentioned it there. It's really great. 100 Boyfriends is visceral and raw. It's published by one of my favorite UK publishers. It's really worth picking up. I've seen it on so many bestseller lists. It keeps appearing on bestseller lists. People are reading it, people are loving it, and I'm thrilled to see that. 100 Boyfriends is fantastic. Here's a book from Taiwan. I mentioned it recently. I love Taiwan. I love science fiction. I love queer fiction, and this is all of that. This is The Membranes by Chi Ta Wei. It is fantastic. It was written back in 1995, and it has now been translated into English, and we finally have it. Speculative science fiction about a lesbian couple who raise a young trans girl, and it's told from her perspective now that she's age 30 and she lives in a bubble at the bottom of the ocean. It's science fiction. It's about the effect that people have on each other's lives, the effect that humanity has on the planet. It has a lot of big ideas in a very small space, and it wonderfully explores transgenderness as a kind of scientific philosophy. It's got a lot of big ideas, and it's really, really well executed while telling an incredibly intimate story about mother-daughter relationships. It's really stunning. Chi Ta Wei is a very punk and forward-thinking writer who continues to do amazing work. Taiwanese fiction is some of the best fiction in the world. Check out The Membranes. Oh, it's good. It's really good. Okay, ordinarily this would be my number one pick, but I cheated, as I said, and there are 11 on this list, so I've got 2 left to talk about, and one of those 2 is Heaven by Mieko Kawakami. Mieko Kawakami is my favorite Japanese writer. I love her so much. I loved Breasts and Eggs. It was my favorite book of 2020. I've said this a few times now, and Heaven is spectacular. She's done it again. I also loved Ms. Ice Sandwich, her novella, which was published by Pushkin Press. She is so great. Words fail me when I talk about Mieko Kawakami. Heaven is a short novel translated by Sam Bett and David Boyd, and it tells the story of a young 14-ish-year-old boy in school who's being bullied, and a girl that he meets called Kojima, who is also being bullied by the girls in her class, and the two of them form a kind of relationship where they become kind of a life raft for each other, but their relationship is also kind of toxic and strained as it goes on. It's complicated. There is a moment at the halfway point of this novel that is the most powerful thing that I've read this year. It is a conversation between our protagonist and another character. I will not spoil it. You'll know it when you get to it. It's phenomenal. Heaven is heart-wrenching. It's difficult. It's horrible, and it feels like it's beating you up, and it is about a boy getting beaten up, so it's not nice, but it is a masterpiece of Japanese literature. Please read Heaven. Mieko Kawakami is the best. This is my favorite book in translation of this year so far, written by the author who wrote my favorite book in translation of last year. She's the best. She is one of the... She's amazing. She's great. Please read Heaven, or Mieko Kawakami, Heaven. Yes, read it now. All of that said, Heaven is still not my favorite book of this year so far. My favorite book of this year so far goes to a book that is not in translation, and this book is right here. This here. Detransition Baby by Tori Peters is my favorite book of this year so far. I think it might end up being my favorite book of 2021. I don't see how anything is going to dethrone it, honestly, but we'll see. Detransition Baby is a masterpiece. It is a true visionary novel by an incredible American writer. Tori Peters is a trans woman who has written the transgender novel, in my opinion. Detransition Baby tells the story of 3 people. A woman who is a trans woman, a man who has detransitioned from being a trans woman, and his boss who he has entered into a heterosexual relationship with. And the 3 of them form a very, very strange and forced and belabored love triangle, because all 3 of them kind of maybe want to have a family, and they're creating this strange, impossible family unit that is just incredible, and it is bucking old conservative trends and showing you how love and family can exist in every form, but it's also far more than that. That's what it seems like it's going to be at first, but really it's about the explorations of these strange and damaged and broken people. These relationships are horrible, they're narcissistic, they're twisted. These people are beaten and abused, and they've beaten and abused each other. Oh man, oh, they're so great. Ames, the man who has detransitioned, is a character that I find so much solace in. He is broken and he is twisted and he is so sad. Just, oh God. Oh, I think about Ames every day. I love this character. I love him with all of his flaws and all of his selfishness and his twisted mind, and he's been through so much, and this tortured soul, my God. Detransition Baby is my favourite book of this year. It's incredible. I could ramble about it for fucking hours. Please read Detransition Baby. I'm sure you already have. So many of us have. It was snubbed on the Women's Prize. It was on the long list. It did not make the short list. But don't worry, it actually won because I say it did. Detransition Baby is perfect. I hope it's the biggest book of this year. These are my favourite books of this year so far. Please go check all 11 of them out. And there are a lot of books that I didn't mention, but I've done videos on them. You can go check them out. I've done articles, go read them, or ignore me completely. It's up to you. I got a lot more books to talk about this month, next month, all the way through the year. There is some great stuff that's still yet to come out that I can't wait to talk about. And I will talk about some of these books again at the end of the year when I do a list on the best books of the year when it's all over. For now, go read all 11 of these books. They are all worth your time, and subscribe for books.